For logical reasoning, you're 35 minutes, about 24 to 26 questions. So I would aim to finish it with about 5 minutes remaining. And that's tough, of course. It's tough because you already have very limited time, very strict time constraints. But this is where pacing comes in. You could train yourself to blast through the easy questions, like let's say the first 10 questions. If you did them in 10 to 12 minutes altogether, you would then have a big time bank. You'd have about 24, 25 minutes for the remaining 15 questions. So you've significantly upped your amount of time on average available per question. And then from there, you can mark off anything you have difficulty with, anything that gives you trouble, flag even just 3 to 6 questions, as many as that. Come back to them later at the end with your 5 minutes remaining, that time bank. It's really powerful to be able to let go of a tough question because you can trust that you'll be able to come back to it later. I'd say if there's a question giving you trouble, just skip it, come back to it later. You really don't want to risk getting bogged down on a tough question because it can ruin your morale, ruin your enthusiasm, ruin your momentum, and you really don't want to risk that, especially since everything's worth the same. It's definitely not easy to let go. It's something that comes with time. You have to train yourself. It's like a focus training to force yourself, let go if you're not making headway, and trust that you'll be able to come back to it later. But even if not, that was the most difficult question for you. You don't want to spend time on that and keep investing time on that, like throwing good money after bad when you still have these other questions you haven't even touched yet. It's not easy to do, but practice it. Practice, give yourself the task. You do a time section. Say, I'm going to flag at least 3 questions to skip and come back to it later. Try it out. See how it goes. And then, of course, refine your pacing so that you do have time at the end to go back. So for reading comp order of difficulty, there are the 4 passages. Each one has maybe 7 questions on average. But within and we don't really know if the 4th passage will be the hardest or the first will be the easiest. Maybe there's a general order, but it's hard to say. But then within a passage, you can do the questions in an order that works for you. So doing the main idea and primary purpose questions first, everything general in nature first, then doing the detail-oriented questions with specific line references, and then finally the more inferential questions that require reading between the lines. And this question 17, of course, is a perfect example of reading between the lines where it's very subtly indicated there, it's not obvious. Part of becoming better at this exam is becoming increasingly skeptical and critical, not only of the questions and the passages, but of your own mindset and realizing what can you reasonably infer and assume versus what you can't, and the fine line in between those. We're all irrational, and the exam plays on our common misconceptions and the common logical fallacies that we as human beings are prone to. But you improve with time. There are a limited number of patterns in flawed reasoning that the LSAT tests, and over time you expose yourself to them and you train yourself to avoid making them, and not only avoid making them, but to spot them when you see others make them, like the person speaking in a logical reasoning question, for example. One thing you can do as an exercise is you can go through all the answer choices for every flaw question and every role of statement question, any of those questions where they use abstract language. And you can, running through those answer choices, define them for yourself. Make sure that you thoroughly understand what the answer choice means, what it's saying, so that you can better understand it when it shows up in the future. Then you can either eliminate it or choose it based on your pre-phrase of what the method of reasoning might be, what the flaw might be, what the argument part might be. But define it for yourself. Define those choices. What does it mean when they're confusing the antecedent with the consequent or something really abstract like that? I recommend 2.5 to 3 minutes total on your initial read of the passage. The thing is that if you have an average of 7 questions per passage, any longer than 3 minutes, you're already giving yourself less than a minute per question. You have to develop a sense of which information to slow down on and read more thoroughly, like viewpoints, the author's opinion, main idea, and then speed up on the information that's less important up front, like all the details and supporting examples. We have nearly 100 released exams. That's nearly 400 released passages. And you could also redo them there is value in redoing questions, even on a section like reading comp where you might remember stuff. It's more important to walk through the thought process and the reasoning behind all the questions and answers. So you could redo all 400 passages before you ever touch anything like the Economist or Scientific American. Those publications are great to familiarize yourself with topics and get more comfortable with certain topics you may not like. But at the end of the day, the LSAT passage is always the best material of all. Having an LSAT reading comprehension roadmap means you know where to go back to in the passage when you need to. You may not have necessarily digested all of that information up front, but as long as you know where it is and you can find it when you need to, that's all you really need. So if there's a section of the passage that involves evidence, you mark off in the margin perhaps a little E for evidence. So you know to go back and find it when you need it. But in the moment, if there's lots of details or supporting examples on a topic you don't like, and there's a lot of nitty-gritty specifics with unfamiliar terminology, you don't want to try and thoroughly understand that all in the moment. It's too much. It's better just mark off where you can find it when you need it and skim through that part to go back later. I personally don't take notes anymore. I did for a long time. And I find the students who do best on reading comp mark very little or not at all. And so when you take notes, maybe a quick little thing in the margin, V for viewpoint, E for evidence, A for advocates. And you just mark VEA in the margin, and that way you know where to find it when you need it. But the idea is that at least you know where in the passage the evidence is, so that when you want to find textual support for a given answer choice, either proving or disproving one, you can find it in the passage quickly and reread the part you need to reread. They can be very tricky sometimes. Sometimes they'll even say the painters referenced in line 30 would most likely agree with which one of the following. And then the actual information is much later in the passage. So even if the painters were in line 30, the information about the painters that you need to solve the question might be in line 55. This actually happens in, I think it's prep test 29, passage 1. This exact situation happened. Very frustrating because it's the line reference that they give you in the question stem is actually a decoy. It's a trick.